the idea that this would be the YouTube recording.
Yeah.
T-shirts again.
Yeah. All right, so this is hello, we're broadcast from London and all over the place. And Martin Hawksey is our host over in London. Over to him. We'll do introductions in a minute.
Hi there.
So do you want to introduce, can everybody introduce themselves there, and then we'll do it over here?
Sure, I'm Martin Hawksey, so I work for the Association for Learning Technology, and I'm joined by...
I'm Josie Fraser. I currently work for the UK government in the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport.
Hi, I'm Maren Deepwell. I'm the Chief Executive of the Association for Learning Technology, and together with Martin and Brian Mathers, we were talking about the work ALT does and accreditation for professionals in education today.
Go on, Alan, let's start from the left.
I'm on the right.
Oh,
I'm actually,
sorry.
but I'm a lefty, so I'm confused. Alan Levine from Strawberry, Arizona, internet geek. Dog lover. Cats are okay too.
Microphone, please, Debbie.
Oh, hi.
There you go.
Sorry. I'm Debbie Bath. I'm a senior academic developer based in Swansea in South Wales in the UK. And I've worked with a couple of people that I can see. Hello, Maren. Hello, Martin. And I recognise a couple of other faces. Hi, Josie. It's really exciting to be here. So, and I like cats and dogs, but there you go.
And Keegan, you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Keegan. I'm an educational technologist at the University of Oklahoma, and just jumping in because looked like a fantastic group of people to hang with this morning. So, yeah.
And Ken Bauer, Associate Professor of Computing Science here in Guadalajara, Mexico, and saying hi to Maren and Martin and Josie there, also on the OER committee for the last couple of years. And I have a dog.
And then there's me, and apparently I'm lagging really badly, so I'll shut up most of the time. But I'm on the west coast of the USA, and I also love dogs and have a couple of barn cats who are really good mousers and molars and ratters and squirrel hunters and occasionally bird catchers. Enough of that. So how's the conference? Tell us about the conference. Tell us what it's like.
It's very, very buzzy here. There's a really great atmosphere. It's kind of a sprawl of activity. It's really fun. It's a fun place to be, and there's a lot of hard work actually going on in various rooms, and there's a lot of quite hardcore talks going on in various rooms as well. It seems to be a really nice mix of people actually. In terms of kind of diversity, I think they're doing well here. It's a good mix of different people, different ages, different backgrounds, different genders, all kinds of different people here. So it's been great so far. And I've just been to the kind of the behemoth of open knowledge chat downstairs, where we had Brian Malarkey from Creative Commons, we had Mark Sermon from Mozilla, and Catherine Maha from Wikimedia, talking about the open movement and what's going on with that and how to take that forward. So and they're doing that at the different conferences that are going on globally at the moment. So they're doing the same kind of sideshow tour at Wikimedia conferences and Creative Commons conferences as well. So for me, it's fantastic to see the movement coming together and thinking very seriously about the issues of moving forward together.
Well, I've got something far more exciting to show you, because if you're here in person, you can pick up Mozilla socks. So
you can have as many as you want.
You can promote you can promote the open internet via socks, which obviously I'll be doing. But it's my first time here at the festival, and it's a really fun experience. As Josie said, this is based in an art school here in North Greenwich in London. So we're opposite the O2, which is a big dome-shaped sort of public venue. And where we were giving a talk earlier, you could look out of a round window onto the roof of that building, where they do tourist tours, where tourists walk across the roof of the tour, which really freaked out our participants who thought there was some sort of, crisis happening on the roof of that building. But I've really been enjoying myself. I've only managed, this is 9th floor worth of festival, so there's lots to see. One of the talks I really enjoyed that we saw earlier was people talking about diversity on the internet and how to include people from the global south, how people's voices are being not heard enough, and what we can do about that practically. So I thought in terms of the values of the organization, as Josie said, it's really strong on diversity, but it's nice to actually see like more practical sessions rather than kind of emphasizing values, which, I agree with, but I really wanted to hear about the sort of what can we do about it. So that's really interesting. I thought I really enjoyed that.
It's a great mix here, as it is at the moment in many open knowledge contexts, of let's look inward as a community and what we can do to sort ourselves out as a community and what would actually make us stronger and where our gaps are. And let's look outward into the world and see actually, well, how can we take the kind of critical agenda of strategic openness that's so important for solving so many problems and for addressing so many issues, and how can we take that forward in the kind of more global political outward facing context.
But done
and socks.
And socks. For me, it's no undersell to call it a festival. It really is a festival. There's a real, I'm quite fortunate living in Edinburgh, go to the Edinburgh Festival, and it's a similar sort of vibe of people just dropping into things, dropping out things. It's very unlike a lot of other conferences I've been to, and for me it's a good event to be at, a great event to be at, because it is exposing to a different experience, and there is this real diversity in terms of ideas. And there's a lot of people here who seriously want to make change. They want to make the internet better.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people who are making the internet better. Yeah. There's so many demos of new things. I went to see a demo by Matrix, which to me, that's an unfortunate choice of name, because they're going to be hard to be Googleable. But if you Google Matrix.org or matrix.org, they are on Twitter, they're looking at producing tools to connect up and decentralized communications. Really interesting stuff going on. That's just one example of the kinds of tech communities and developments that are all being showcased here, and all the people that are talking to each other. And it's great to go to a very, very technical presentation and people actually go, woo, yeah, woo! That doesn't happen very often, so that's quite exciting too.
Oh, and they are pink socks as well.
Two colours, two colourways of the socks.
Yeah. I wanted to just chime in there, because I think it's really interesting to see the diversity of the sessions. Some are really technical and some are much more value-based, but it's also a family festival, so we ought to emphasize that there's lots of families here, children and people of all generations. We're actually in a little room of the youth zone, and there's lots of maker zones as well, so there's lots of 3D printing around, other types of technology that you can interact with, and there is a lot of families coming here, a lot of learners, which I think is awesome for a conference, to have more young people who are at the other sort of end of the education spectrum, which I think is really, really gives it a different feel altogether.
One of my favourite things is that we've taken over the library here, and whenever the library in a building gets taken over, it always spells fun.
So I was just, is this something that only happens? Oh, hello, we've got someone else coming in. Shuffling around. So we're not watching their crop then,
There's more chairs now. I can get another chair.
Okay, we're just going. I was just going to ask.
Sorry,
go on, Josie.
Ask away.
I was just going to ask if this is a very London feeling event, because it feels kind of, the diversity and everything else feels really London to me, and I was feeling really homesick when I first read about it and think, oh God, I really wish I was there, because I know I just know what it would be like. Is it something that is going to happen elsewhere around the world, or is it really always based in London? Do you know that? I mean, I know that you guys are not the organisers, but maybe you have that information.
It's been in London for the last 4 years, and probably longer, I think. I think the venue is a big part of that, because they take over the entire art college, and it's a pretty special venue, to be honest.
But to be fair, this is their global MozFest, so we are very lucky to have it in the country at all.
Yeah.
So we can't really, as people that live in the British Isles, we can't really complain that it is London too much, because if you're in Brazil, well, you've got a little bit further to go.
Yeah, that's true. I was listening to the speech a little bit. I didn't manage to listen to it, or not the speech, the conversation on the stage that you mentioned earlier with the 3 people, all American.
Yeah, and to be fair to them, they did mention that, and they did say, you know, we don't feel that comfortable sitting here as 3 North Americans telling the rest of the world what the global strategy should be and how we should move forward. And they also did really, really emphasize that actually they're not the important people. The movement is the important, and the numbers of people that form part of the movement are the important people. So, you know, I think it's a level of maturity of the movement as a whole, that what we're thinking now is how to support all of those people within a broader strategic framework. And you know, how to build leadership right across the board, not just in those flagship representatives that we have at the moment.
Anne-Marie, do you just want to quickly say hello, just to introduce yourself?
Hi. Yeah, so I'm Anne-Marie Scott. I'm from the University of Edinburgh. I have just finished running a session on Wikipedia games, so introducing people to Wikipedia through some fun games and activities, which I was doing with Alice White, who's the Wikimedian in residence from the Wellcome Library. But she can only be here today, and much as she would have loved to be VConnecting, she's gone to Floor 9 to check out some cool stuff instead. I don't blame her.
No, you're not cool. You're cool.
You're cool. But she's only here for 1 day, so, and she did me a massive favour by helping out, so I'm not going to blame her for that.
So yeah, give us, I don't know what I just so what do you think that is the main worry or concern that people, I mean, I get it that there's lots of really fun and cool stuff, but what do you think is the main theme of concern there about our internet that we all live on?
I think it's loss of control. I think there's been quite a few talks this morning about, you know, who's got the power, and I think it's great to see all these individuals coming forward with alternatives, and you know, we don't have to live in the Facebook world. You know, we can have peer-to-peer browsers. People are developing that. There are a lot of standards that we can use already, and if the standards aren't there, there are people developing them. So I think taking more control and ownership of what's going on the internet has been a kind of a vibe I've been picking up.
Yeah, data sovereignty has been a big theme for the chats that I've had. So being able to control your own data and being able to control the access permissions between that kind of data. Obviously, this is not a mainstream audience, although we are quite diverse and there are people here who are less technically minded than others. It is quite a tech focus, so there is a lot of drilling down on the kind of detail of, well, how does that work? What can we put in place that actually works around that?
I think there's quite a bit more on data sovereignty this year than I spotted last year as well. Ownership of data, protection of data, and fake news. There are posters everywhere for fake news, which is probably the same web literacy theme that we've seen for a few years, and the same data journalism theme that's been running here for a few years. But I think it's really focused in on this one kind of moment in the zeitgeist as a way of tapping into people's concerns in that space.
Yeah,
I think there's also the political dimension of net neutrality that we can see in lots of sessions. There's a lot of discussion around that. So yeah, so I think we're all thinking about the political side of things.
And yeah, definitely. And outside of the frame of technology, although I don't think anything is particularly outside of the frame of technology anymore, sustainability is a huge, huge issue here. Inclusion and equity and equality are huge, huge issues here.
Yeah. This is usually the event that busts me out of my little bubble every year.
Okay.
I spend the rest of my year in events focused on higher education, working with students of generally a fairly homogeneous age range and a relatively homogeneous set of backgrounds relative to this conference. And this is the conference that forces me to think about the session I just ran. I could have anybody of any age speaking any language turn up at my session. They could be a Wikipedia power user who's just come to check me out and like
Fans.
Yes,
We get a lot of fans in the Wikimedia movement.
Or they could be a complete beginner with, they could be 12 years old, never edited Wikipedia before. And it really forces you to up your game, think about how you talk, think about how you describe things, think about your own biases.
I think it's one of the interesting things as someone who's bilingual to go to the conference is that they give you little stickers that you can put on your badge when you register, whether you speak another language. And I've spotted lots of people here who indicate that they also speak another language alongside English. And in our session, we had a lot of people who weren't from the UK. So while it is in London and every year in London, it does seem to attract those people at least who can afford the travel and the attendance to come here. It seemed very international and not necessarily just English speaking. So I welcome that inclusion of other languages and that visibility.
I see Ken's comment about a lot of the legislators are old and don't get the internet. Now we've got Josie.
I'm not a legislator. I'm not a legislator. I try and get the internet. Yes, I really do. I do try and get the internet, but I'm not a legislator. But I'm working. Yeah, since we had OER 17, I've taken on a new role in central government here in the National Technology Team. Working across a range of different issues. So, and from my side, there are a lot of people at least in our government, who do get it, who do understand how technology works, and also a lot of people who are very, very willing to reach out and talk to startups, to talk to people who are innovators, to talk to people that don't have a huge amount of money, but they do have great ideas, great drive, great passion as well, to try and better inform the kind of thinking around what we're doing. So I don't want to be, overly rosy about how easy things are to get changed, because I don't think they are, but certainly the situation is probably not as dire as everybody thinks.
Yeah. I went to a really good session this morning on career paths for people into CivTech, which is very interesting as well. So, how do you offer people who are coming through the education system now the opportunity to work on some of the challenges, as opposed to go and take a job with Google or Facebook or whoever's going to pay them lots of money and give them a really nice lunch and then work the hell out of them until they drop dead. How do you show that stereotype of what it is to be a civil servant is not actually that true anymore?
The civil service doesn't pay as well as the private sector in terms of that. So the people that actually are in the civil service around tech actually are quite passionate about what they're doing and about making a contribution and about doing supporting people across the country. So I think maybe that's one way of reaching out, to say that it isn't necessarily some weird thing. I think we're doing a huge amount in the civil service to try and walk the talk in terms of diversity and inclusion and welcoming people from different backgrounds. Actually, it is surprisingly a diverse environment to work in. There are lots of different people working there as well.
But if you want to just ignore the political reality. That's the way it goes in the civil service, isn't it?
Sorry, say that again.
Just ignore the political reality and get on with your jobs, isn't it, in the civil service?
I don't know. I don't know. I think because you're living within a very politicised framework, you're working to, you know, you're working around that. I don't think you can kind of ignore the context that go on, but we're not, civil services is politically neutral.
But I think from my point of view, we all work with policymakers in some degree, and events like this really help, I think, expose you to new narratives that you can then, use in your advocacy or your representation. And I think sharing research like the Internet Health Report, for example, the really hard-hitting arguments that policymakers, have to recognize and can recognize more easily. So I really welcome being here and being exposed to that kind of dialogue, because it really helps us, I think, in the UK and elsewhere, focus the issues and push more strongly for our interests, like keeping the internet open. And particularly for educators, I think there were a lot of people here who work in educational policy to try, I think, to make that message really echo in their sort of policy. Like in our session, there were people who were from I think 3 different American states and a few other countries, so European countries as well, who were all working in policy areas. So I think it's a really fruitful dialogue here.
I think what we need to do is get better at exposing that dialogue and actually the quality of some of the challenges that you get to work on if you get involved in this sort of area. Because actually that's the attractive bit, that's what gets the passion going. It's not that you get a free lunch at work, actually. No. It's that you get a wicked challenge to work on that makes a difference to people's lives. And that's the conversations that people are having here.
Yeah, absolutely. And because the conference is not charged to attend, it's also a different type of audience. And I think some of the VConnecting sessions I've been part of, we talked a lot about the privilege of being here.
You didn't pay.
Most people don't pay to come here as educators.
Oh, okay.
So for people who work in education, you don't pay to attend.
No, I've had to pay.
Really? Yeah.
Facilitators.
Not that expensive.
It's not that expensive, but
It's 50 quid.
we're arguing about it. We're arguing about it. It's not that expensive.
Does it make you pay 50 quid?
It's 40 quid.
No. Well, when I tried to register before I got a ticket, I ticked the right boxes and it said nothing.
Oh, okay.
Marin's here as a 12-year-old.
Maybe they got better sponsorship.
I'm her carer.
Yeah, they do have you don't really pay anything if you're young, or a youngster, because they obviously want to encourage a wide range of people coming. And Marin, if you're Marin, you don't have to pay.
Has it changed a lot over the last few years? Because for me, it's my first time, and Martin's not been here before either. So you are our veteran attendee.
My 4th MozFest. Yes and no. I think probably my first one was quite different to the format seems to have settled down a little bit. The first one, I think the sessions were, I think they were a bit longer actually. There was fewer things in the day. That was good. You got to dive into stuff, but I think there's so much you could do here. I think the 1-hour sessions, they've got the changeover times a bit better. So the number of things you can do in a day feels a bit different now. The themes have mostly stayed the same. I would say privacy and web literacy have been big themes, but that's because they've been big pieces of Mozilla's work in advocacy. So the core of what Mozilla is about hasn't massively changed.
But it's not dominated by Mozilla at all. If any, you see occasional branding on socks.
I'm seeing quite a lot of talk about socks.
But it's not. You go to a Google conference and it's like it's Google.
Yeah.
It's kind of brand wash. Here it's not.
I don't think you've been asked to drink the Kool-Aid here the way they are at other conferences. Yeah. And what I do see is that holy trinity of Mozilla, Wikimedia, and Creative Commons all hanging out together here. Yeah. That happens a lot.
It does feel much more like Mozilla are hosting a platform and a festival for the community, rather than this is Mozilla's thing, which is lovely. It's really lovely.
That's really yeah. Because I think I don't know. When you go back, you kind of Mozilla had such a huge kind of branding, like before Google. It was just so enormous, and it's really interesting how they have so forcefully gone the opposite way, really, and gone away from doing that. So it's nice to see it, first of all, that they've survived, which is no small thing, really.
No, I think that's maybe taking part of inclusivity seriously. If you have the appearance that this is our gang and these, you know, and we belong here, then lots of people will look at that and go, well, I obviously don't belong there because I don't feel comfortable in that environment, or I've never been in that environment before. So it is really important, I think, for all kind of people who are looking to broaden up their communities to kind of think very carefully about those issues of who is welcome here, who do we look like we're welcoming, and who do we, you know, perhaps sometimes look like we're not asking to turn up.
This is the conference I'll quite happily go to on my own, knowing that I don't know anybody else that's going to be there, and I'm really comfortable with that at this one. I think they put a lot of effort in each year on things like the participation guidelines. They do a lot of work to emphasise that, the way they start off the session this morning where they open the event, and they really emphasise the inclusivity element and the respectfulness as well.
So I've got two more questions. Anna Marie, so when you were talking about teaching, when you go back, does this refresh you and give you new ideas about what to take back to?
Yeah, I totally take pictures of loads of people's session plans. I think activity stations people have got set up. I mean, I lost my phone last year when I was here, and it was like the whole conference had not happened, and I lost everything I wanted from it. I get a huge number of ideas which I can use over the rest of the year. A huge number of images, photos, all sorts of material. I find it really quite energizing, to be honest. So yeah, there was a meme lab.
Oh yeah, I saw
stand
that
over there. Yeah, where you can make badges or posters or customize a bag based on remixing a meme, and the way in which it was set up and the different kinds of activities was really cool. So that's something I'd quite like to have a think about. Could we do something similar?
So, and then my other question was, so what are you looking forward to next? So where are you going this evening, and what's happening tomorrow?
There's a party on tonight, I think.
Is there?
On tonight at the Royal Society for
partying. The Royal Society for Partying. It's like manufacturing. It's one of our better or something. It's one of our better English institutions.
Yes. And I'll try sleep.
Yeah. I've got to work tomorrow, unfortunately, so I can't catch anything, so I'm kind of cramming as much as I can today.
Me too. Yeah, only here for today, so I'm going to be travelling back this evening. No partying for me.
Are you here for tomorrow?
Unfortunately not. So this is.
I'm going to be all on my own tomorrow.
Oh.
All these working people.
With the rest of the festival.
Hundreds of people who are out. How many people are here? Do anybody
We're
know?
staying downstairs 1,500.
Okay,
So,
wow.
yeah, I guess over the days coming in and out around that day.
Was it 800 submissions as well or something?
Yeah,
Like
and
that, so,
Very good.
338 sessions.
yeah.
Obviously, ours were the best ones, just in case you were wondering.
Yeah.
One thing to point out, maybe for those who are watching, the program is online as well as on an app, but you can access it all on freely on the internet. And I found it really great to just browse through, and there's lots of resources. And as a presenter, you can upload resources and images and things. So I think it's a really rich amount of content that you can visit if you know where to look. So I think looking at some links is a good.
And I'll be uploading my very sexy introduction to APIs with Google Sheets.
Martin's now doing sexy API intros. It's a new thing. He's cornering them all.
Sexy APIs. You go for it.
APIs.com. Check it out. There's a big Martin there.
I wonder something about the tension, because like I know when you go, like I know when I went, like you get this great reaffirmation and assurance, like you're in a tribe of people who understand and they are expanding. And then like Ken was suggesting, when you talk to people outside the tent, whether it's students or you look around and people are pushing their phones all the time, and I'm looking at the words on the board that the majority of people aren't even considering. It's not even in their range of thinking about what the impact is. And it's sometimes hard, you want to be optimistic and not pessimistic at the same time. So, and it's really important to have this kind of gathering so it can fuel you when you go back and you're among. So, I applaud the environment there, but at the same time, I realize it's like, man, there's so much work to do.
I don't know. I was just gonna say, I often get that same feeling. But actually, at this event, I think that we've gotten better at articulating what we're thinking in this environment to take to other people. Like I've come away, I've taken lots of pictures as well today, and I've come away with some things that I think even the most skeptical, uninterested, disengaged person, I can use that as an argument with. And I think actually, I agree, that's a real problem. And I have that a lot because most of the people I have to negotiate with belong firmly in the skeptical camp. So I've actually gotten quite a lot of sort of new ammunition and data to kind of take to them. So that was my sense today.
So for me, I think it comes from the other way around. I think that, yes, there's a lot of disinterest over here, but actually as technology moves forward, permeates more of our lives, structures more of our identities and our relationships and our personal relationships as well as our political and other relationships, actually those problems do actually become mainstream problems and mainstream concerns in a way. So privacy actually does start to become a thing. Fake news does start to actually become a thing that people do care about, want to engage in. So part of our job, I think, is kind of being aware of which direction of the we're traveling in, and actually start thinking like how can we support that more mainstream audience and argument who are going to be interested in these things at some point, even if they're not that bothered at the moment. So the work here is not wasted in terms of I don't feel like we're talking to ourselves. I think it's an important kind of thing to think about in terms of where are we going with this and how can we help other people when they do get interested in these areas.
I think there's also some really practical work gets done on road testing what activities for advocacy work. So you can bring an activity to this event, you can run it, you can get feedback on it, you can check whether it gets traction, you can get feedback on it, and then you can take that out and repeat it with another audience, maybe a more skeptical audience somewhere. I mean, I'm certainly getting ideas for sessions I could run myself in other places based on what other people have done here, but as somebody running a session, I can see that you could use it as a kind of safe space and a camp to test your advocacy. So I think you're right, it's a conversation between ourselves, but it's not a worthless conversation, but it's also practical knowledge that we can take away.
And the world is changing very quickly, and I think we're probably more aware of that than a lot of other people who perhaps aren't paying attention to it until they have a big cyberbullying crisis or a big privacy crisis or whatever the issue that comes up is. So as a community, we're in a very strong place to help support people and organisations move through those things.
Also, this is an all ages event. We're doing this from a pod just by the youth zone. And actually we've talked about how diverse this audience is. There are a lot of really young people here.
We believe that children are the future.
Obviously, we are such young people. Well, I get
getting younger every day, getting younger by the day.
Indoctrinate them to the bring them into the light before they.
I'm aware.
Somebody else like joining in on the singing.
On that note, on that optimistic note, get on with your fantastic festival, not conference, festival. That's fantastic that we're coming from a festival and not a conference. So, guys, thank you so much for talking to us. We've been a bit quieter at our end, I'm saying to us lot.
We've been very noisy, I'm so sorry.
But thank you so much. It's been really lovely. So I'm just going to stop the broadcast now. So,
go on, Josie, sing us out.
Thank you so much.